commentary on the verse number 13th and 14th, and just about that we got disconnected. So I'll carry forward from there. So what Madhusudana Saraswati gives a very nice commentary. He's saying that, look here, Bhagavan is talking about Sakama Upasana as an alternative for people who sort of have not, what do you call, not qualified, have not graduated to that level where they can truthfully and honestly and effectively do Nirguna Upasana. And therefore, what is the alternative Bhagavan has? Bhagavan, therefore, willy-nilly sort of praises the Saguna Upasakas. But he says that even there are a lot of other sources and sastras which sort of makes it very clear that in case of these those who are incapable of meditating on the Nirvishesha Brahman, for them they are mandas, te anukampyante savishesha nirupanehi. So by doing this savishesha nirupana upasana, they sort of graduate to that level. Basikrite manas yesam. And then when the mind has been captured, has been controlled, has been established in the path of the divine, Saguna Brahma Silanat, is a result of the Saguna Upasana. Tadeva Avir Bhavet Sakshat. As soon as that happens, then that Atma Jnana appears. Apeta Upadhi Kalpanam. Upadhi Kalpana is that whatever Saguna, Nama, Rupa, whatever. And then that is removed. Sakshat Jnana Bhavet. That appears, and there is no need for any Upadhi Kalpana, any name and form. There he says one good thing here. He's saying, Tadevam Akhyar Upasana Ninda Saguna Upasana Stute na tu heyateya. So when Bhagavan says the Saguna Upasakas are closer to me, dearer to me, he's not trying to do Ninda for the Nirguna Upasakas, but in order for Stuti of the Saguna Upasakas, because that is the medicine they require at this particular level of their sadhana. Udita Homa Vidhau Anudita Homa Nindavas. So there is a certain Homa you have to do. And somebody may not be interested to do it, or might say it's quite cumbersome, why to do it, why can't we avoid it? So at that particular point, there is a bit of Ninda of some other Homa at that particular point of time, so that you feel, okay, so I'm doing the right thing, let me do this. There is a certain principle in our spiritual tradition, which we were mentioning before we got terminated. Nahi ninda nindyam ninditum pravartate. Apitu vidheyam stotum. Whenever we criticize anyone, it's not to actually criticize him, but in order to sort of vidheyam stotum, whatever is vidheya, whatever we should be doing it, in order to praise it, in order to prescribe it, we have this Ninda Vakyas mentioned there. There's a beautiful story about Ramakrishna, always he mentions that in order to educate the daughter-in-law, the mother will shout at her own daughter, because she doesn't want to shout at the daughter-in-law because she has come, she's a guest at the house. So she will sort of, upbraid or correct her own daughter, saying, oh, you are not learning anything. What will happen to you when you go to your husband's house? You're going to create problems, blah, blah, blah. Those were patriarchal societal systems which are no more relevant now. But that story is very interesting. Like, for example, if there's a new boss and he wants to correct, and there is some other guy who is trying to act a little smart, what do? You shout at somebody you know, saying that, well, these things are not acceptable. You might feel a little bad that he's so loyal to you, you're shouting, but you correct him later on, saying that, look here, I had to send out a message to everybody else, and you became my victim today, but you were actually an instrument to send out the message. Similarly here, whenever there is any Ninda Vakya, it is not necessarily to consider something as heya or inferior, but in order for sort of glorifying something which is required at that point of time. Priyo hi jnanino atyartham aham cha sacha mama priyaha udaraha sarva evete jnani tvam eva me matam. So Bhagavan has already made it clear. Madhusudana quotes him from an earlier verse and says that, Bhagavan has clarified it already that though all these different kinds of upasakas, artharthi, artha, jigyasu, and jnani, all of these people are udaraha. They're all good, fine, praiseworthy, sarva evete. However, amongst them, who is dearest to me? The jnani. So, whom does Bhagavan appreciate? Whom does God has his heart out, open for all the time? It's the jnani. Why? Because Bhagavan has made it clear he is very much a part of me. He is me myself, and therefore is dearest to me. Therefore, Madhusudana beautifully says, Ityadina punah punah prasastatama taya uktaha tesam eva jnanam dharmajatam cha anusaryaniyam. So he sort of clarifies to Arjuna that you do Shaguna Upasana, that is what you are capable of at this moment. However, please remember that in course of time, you have to sort of, in course of time, you have to realize that you have to do Nirguna Upasana and follow the path of these people who? The Jnanis. So once you graduate, once you go to the higher level, you have to have Dharma Jatam Jnanam. What is Dharma? You have to do the Nitya, Namitika Karma, all these for Antakarana Suddhi and all the good activities. So you do Sattva Suddhi. Then as a result of that, you have desire for Atma Jnana in order to do Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. So Bhagavan is laying out the whole canvas and the whole roadmap how to sort of progress in the spiritual practices. Anusaraniyam adhikaram asadhya tvaya iti arjunam vibodhaisuhu. Bhagavan wants to explain it to him, and therefore Bhagavan wants to do what? Because of this desire, he's saying Paramahitaisi. Paramahitaisi, he is very compassionate towards Arjuna. Bhagavan Veda Darshinaha Kritakrityan Akshar Upasakan Prabhuti Saptavi. So next 7 verses, Bhagavan, having talked about Shaguna Upasana, is returning to glorifying Nirguna Upasana, because this is the coursework for the Saguna Upasakas. Once they are established in Saguna Upasana and they have purified their minds, they have achieved a certain level of focus and concentration, they would be ready for Nirguna Upasana. So Bhagavan is saying, you are doing Saguna Upasana, it's fine, but from the verses he mentions, starting with verse 13 till 19, it's obvious that Bhagavan is telling that this is what is your destination. Right now, you're doing Shaguna Upasana, and in order to motivate you, I am describing you as Yukta Tamaha. But don't forget, this is what you have to achieve later on, as soon as you are ready for it. Advesta Sarva Bhutanam Maitraha Karuna Evacha Nirmamo Nirahankaraha Samadukka Sukha Kshami Santushtam Satatam Yogi Yatatma Dridha Nischayah Mayarpitamon Yo Madbhaktah Same Priyaha. So in these 2 verses, we have done Sankarabhasya earlier. We'll only focus on the Madhusudana. Wherever there's any requirement, we'll go back to Sankaracharya. So we have done the basics. Adveshta Sarva Bhutana. Dvesa Rahita is not having any aversion, any enmity, any hatred, any attitude of violence. Sarva Bhutana. Why? These Jnanis are Sarva Karma Sannyasis. They have already given Abhaya. We have discussed the mantras. They have to do Ucharana that particular night when they will discard their Chita and Chaitanya and everything, and they become sannyasis. They have to give abhay to all the animals and birds and plants, saying that, look here, we are not going to do any karma kandas, and therefore don't fear that we will either hurt anyone or anything. No sacrifices anymore. No ghee or rice, anything to be thrown into fire, or any fire sacrifices, nothing. We are sacrificing our very life. We are becoming sannyasis. Sarva Bhutana Maitraha, then you have that Shraddha Bhava, that loving attitude, and Karuna, compassionate, Evacha, Nirmamo, this is mine, that thing they don't have anymore. Nirahankara, I am this, I'm a man, I'm powerful, I'm handsome, I'm rich, those thoughts they don't have. Then sama, dukkha, sukha, shami. So they are having an attitude of equanimity in happiness and sadness. They don't have any perturbation in their mind. And shami, they're very forgive. They're full of forgiveness. They're forgiving in their attitude. Then he sort of elaborates further, santushtaha. So whatever they get, they're contented. They are not craving. They don't have that dissatisfied attitude. They are not very choosy or fastidious that, no, I'm not happy with this. I want some more. No, they don't have that attitude. They have craving for only one thing, that is how to understand what is the self and how to be at a level of complete detachment and in complete love with this whole universe without getting attached with anyone. Santushtaha satatam. And there is a beautiful explanation in Sankaranandi why this word satatam. A person cannot sit in meditation all the time because there is a samadhi dasa and there is a vyuthana dasa. He has to also take a bath and take some lunch, say hello to a friend who arrives to say, meet him. And satatam. So therefore satatam, that means sada sarvada. He comes back to his samadhi avastha as soon as his job is over, his lunch is over, his whatever interaction that was supposed to do that is over. Then he returns to his inner self. Satatam yogi. And this yoga is kind of, there's another commentator very nicely has mentioned, it is sort of pointing at a very ancient attitude. It's not about that practice as such. He's saying that this word here, satatam yogi, is pointing at a certain attitudinal disposition towards life, not of dissipation, not of vikshepa, not of running around, not of being curious about the world, but being somebody who is kind of all the time self-aware. That kind of an attitude is being glorified here, yatatma, and he's controlling his senses. He cannot be in samadhi. Nevertheless, you have to have your senses in control. Dhrida nishchayaha. You have to have complete faith that where you are. I mean, if you start having doubts because you are at this level where the Sravana Manana Nididhyasana is almost kind of accomplished, and the basic Parokya Jnana you have already got, and you have to have that firmness of belief. Don't have to be prejudiced, don't have to be, kind of a blind believer in anything, because our tradition always calls upon us to exercise our reason and logic, to question, to hammer out all fears and all apprehensions and confusions. So you be logical, you raise the questions, but don't harbor the attitude of a doubting Thomas. You have to have an attitude of love and what they call now these days called appreciative inquiry. So you study it, but with an attitude of trying to understand. Not that I want to refute everything. Of course, you can do that, but you have to figure out what's the goal of your study. If you want to actually grasp what's the meaning, and by just lexiconic knowledge doesn't help unless we reach that level through meditation, through some sadhana. Whatever we read, these sentences will convey some lexiconic knowledge, some verbal knowledge, but that will not take us anywhere because the connectivity happens with what is referred to here. And what is referred to is not present in the text. That is in the reality, where we have to ourselves reach there through our own spiritual practice. Dhrida nishchayaha. Mayar pita manor buddhi. Mano buddhir. Yo mad bhaktaha. Mana and buddhi, why both are there? Manas is a kind of an emotional aspect. In psychology, what do you call the conative aspect? You have emotional, the manomaya kosha. So you have desires and sankalpa vikalpa atmaga. So I want to have this, I want to have that, associated with desires, aspirations. Buddhi nischayatmika vichara, adhyavasaya. So it will analyze, why should I do it? Why shouldn't I do it? Rational. It's like the right side and left side of the brain. Those of you are sort of have looked at the Carl Sagan's I'm Joe's brain. So the right side is kind of a little emotional, of course, very insightful. Left side is much more rational. So the one who sort of surrenders both his manas and buddhi, his intellect and his mind. Mind is that, jumping around animal which is there in our subjective world. Yo madbhaktaha, the one who is doing my bhajana, that means meditating on the Atma, not Vasudeva as a Krishna, but Vasudeva Sarvamiti, because we are talking about this Nirgunopasakas, Same Priyaha, is that Jnani. So let's look at how Madhusudana talks about it. If there is anything in Sankaracharya, we'll go there. Sarvani Bhutani Atmatvena Pashyan. He sees everything as me. Why? Because these Nama Rupas are delusions. What is the real thing? Self. There is a book, there is a pot, there is a house, there is a lady, there is a man. What is common to all of this? That isness. And Bhagavan has already explained to us in chapter 7 that he himself, that this para and apara prakriti, and para prakriti is that chetana, and sarva jiva bhuta. So Bhagavan himself is present in all of us as antaryami. And that Suddha Satta, Kutastha, that Atma, you see only that aspect. That is the abstraction that you have to do to sort of discard what is physically present to your senses and try to experience, try to be aware of what is not, immediately available to our senses. That is the presence. That comes through, our Shastriya Jnana plus meditation and analysis, because that is nowhere to see. The Atma cannot be seen, cannot be touched, cannot be felt. So how do you realize its presence? Only through meditation. Only not meditation by closing eyes, but in Vedanta it's Suddha Vicharatmaka. It's extremely rational, and you try to understand, discard all of the thoughts. And he's saying, Atmatvena Pashyan, having seen everything by Pashyan, is here by knowing. It's not by physically seeing through your naked eyes. Atmana dukkha hetu api. If somebody is trying to hurt you, causing some harm or some pain, pratikula buddhi abhavat, because you don't have that negative attitude towards anything, because you are a jnani, not dvesta, you are not having any anger, any kind of dvesha, any aversion, sarva bhutana, kintu maitra. So you have that maitri bhava. What is that? Snigdhata, tadvan. You have that snigdhata, vat. What is that snigdhata? You have that smooth, sweet, compassionate attitude towards everybody. Yataha karunaha, and then you are full of kindness. Karuna, dukhites. If somebody is not in a good place, like you study very good philosophical books, and then you must have seen that there's an innocent, very good guy sitting next to you. Just imagine you are crossing Ganga to go to Ramakrishna Mission or to go to Dakshineshwar. There is a nice guy sitting next to you, and you are reading a Vedanta book, and he's a little curious. He says, "Sir, what are you reading? What is this book?" And then he looks at it. You give this to him. He says, "So what is written? If you read this, you will get the self. You can get to know the self." And you feel great love for that guy because he's so pure like a child. He's not trying to doubt you or anything. He feels deprived because he's maybe not very educated, not very exposed to it. So in this, and they are all dukhis. It's not about somebody having money and then he's happy. It's quite possible that he may be rich, but maybe spiritually he requires a bit of compassion from you. So dukhitesu daya. Okay? And tadvan, and you have that daya, that compassion, that kindness. Sarva bhuta abhayadata. And what kind of, it's not that you're sort of trying to wave your hands at everybody saying, "I protect you" or anything. You have an attitude of no harm, attitude of staying off that particular limit where they can have their individual freedom. And then you sort of encourage their lives to be more beautiful in whichever way you can, whichever way you contribute. Then hands off as soon as you have done. Don't get into their life to manipulate. That is a violation of the spiritual principle. It's very important to sort of have a hands-off approach in spiritual life, because otherwise you get really trapped in it. Abhayadata Paramahansa Parivrajaka Ityartha, and he is essentially a person who is a sannyasi, Paramahansa. There are 3-4 kinds of sannyasis. One is the Kutichaka, who stays in one place and does his sadhana. Then there is a Bahudaka, Bahu Udaka, because he does a lot of kriyas and karmas using water. And he could be at one place or multiple places. all the tirthas he goes to do and tarpanas and all kinds of things. And then you have Hansa, there's another level, and then Paramahansa. And then there is also one category in certain other Upanishads called Abhaduta. He doesn't follow any laws, whatever. The Paramahansa is one particular kind of sannyasi. And then there are two kinds of sannyasas. One is Vidvat sannyasa and one is Vividisa sannyasa. Vividisa sannyasa is where sannyasa as an act, as a process of transition, sort of precedes actual self-realization. So Ramakrishna Paramahansa Thakur did not take sannyasa from anybody before he was a student or a jnani. In Totapuri, just formally sort of, it's presumed that he may have taken, but he would continue to wear white clothes. So these are Bidva sannyasis. They have already jnana and therefore they are disconnected. Nigamananda, for example, he sort of went to Puri, he had taken sannyas, but he went back to his white. He was a great self-realized person. He didn't bother about all this. So it is said that he used to, wear some yasmin garlands and chew pan and nicely sit on a rickshaw and ask him to take him to temple. He just enjoy his life. People used to think he's a Bengali jamidar living in Puri because he lived a very happy, prosperous life towards the end of his few years before he returned to Calcutta to leave his body. He was kind of happy guy, chewing his pan and walking around in Jagannath temple and along the sea beach. He's a Bidvat sannyasi. But Dividisa sannyasi is the kind of sannyasis we are. We take sannyasa to study Vedanta. So it's basically a change of your format or your appearance and certain mental attitudes and habits, and you stay away from home and you follow the laws and regulations so that you are not disturbed in your study of Vedanta. Self-realization is intended here. This is Vividisa. In order to know, as a result of your desire to know, you are taking sannyasa first. Bidva sannyasa is exactly the opposite, where he doesn't need any diksha. There is something also called artha sannyasa, where a person is diseased and is about to die, is a terminal patient. He wants a sannyasa diksha because he thinks it's slightly a sacred act and maybe next birth he will continue his sadhana. He wants to take sannyasa, that is also fine. There are different categories. Here he is saying, Paramhansa Paribrajakaha ityartha nirmamo dehepi mama iti pratyaya rahitaha. Even if he has his body, he doesn't, the sannyasis don't go and stand before the mirror several times or do their hairdo or anything, they don't care for anything. So they don't have that dehatma buddhi. Nirahankaraha vritta swadhyayadi krita ahankara atikrantaha. Ahankarat niskrantaha. So they are kind of released from the sanskaras or impressions or ties which sort of binds them to this dehatma buddhi or their ego self, that I am this. How do they release themselves from the ego consciousness? He is saying it beautifully. Vritta swadhyaya dikrita. What is that vritta? Is acharana. Sad acharana, like nitya namitika karma and sadachara. And then what? Swadhyaya. Then he studies. So he has practice and theory. He lives a good, clean life, and then he studies the sastras. Together, by using these both, he sort of releases himself, his mind, his consciousness, from an attachment to the ego self. That is what he becomes nirahankara. Dvesa ragayor apravartakatvena. There is no pravriti, dvesa, raga, attraction, aversion, these things. The pravriti is not happening. Because there is no pravriti, you don't have any movement towards experience of either attraction or aversion. And because of your swadhyaya and acharana, and plus vichara and everything, Same sukhe dukhe jasya saha. Then he has an attitude of equanimity in happiness and sadness and in misery. He doesn't take these things too seriously. Because what we call pleasure and pain affect what? It affects our body, our ego, our mind. But they have dissociated themselves from these things, saying this is a playground of Prakriti. I am different from it. Once we have this understanding that I'm different from the playground of Prakriti, let me protect my pure consciousness, then it's easier to dissociate. Ata eva kshami, and therefore he is very forgiving, forgiving in nature. Okay, and how akrosana tadanadina api na vikriyam apadyate. Somebody also sort of shouts at him or sort of misbehaves. You have this famous story of Arjun there, who was kind of, I think, put to death by one Mughal emperor, maybe Aurangzeb, but he didn't complain, nor did he display his spiritual powers or anything. He tolerated the violence because he was liberated. He said, okay, this body is going to go, so who cares? Sankaracharya was asked by one Kapalika, one Tantrika, say, you have a beautiful young body, I want to sacrifice it for my spiritual rituals. What did he say? It's fine, if you want to do it, I got no problem. He was about to be sacrificed when Padmapada came, and I think either it's Totakacharya or Padmapada, maybe Padmapada, who came, and he actually sort of killed that tantric and liberated or saved the life of his guru because he needed him. But Sankaracharya had surrendered himself, saying, okay, you want to kill me, I got no problem. So that is how they are Shami. So we have done the first verse. Advesta sarvabhutana maitraha karuna evacha nirmamo nirahankaraha samadukha sukha shami. Then santushta satatam yogi yadatma dridha nischayah mayarpida mano buddhir yomad bhaktah same priyaha. Let's look at it. Tasyeva visheshanantarani. Then he expanding with the help of a few more specialities about this kind of nirguna upasakas. A few more adjectives he's bringing in to describe them. And you know why the Shastra always describes good people? We have discussed that earlier. Whatever is the lakshana of a jnani becomes sadhana of an aspirant. A person who is very rich, you have these interviews with people who are very rich. I yesterday watched in the news, there was this young boy from Bangalore. His name is Sam Kamath. He's just 34, 35. And he's one of the youngest billionaires India has produced. He's a dollar billionaire. He started off, he's a school dropout. He just studied class 10th. And then he got into a call center. He started investing in stocks and whatever. Now he's a kind of an investor and he's a billionaire. So they was taking this interview over a long period of time, asking him a lot of questions relating to how he manages his time, what does he plan to do in the years to come. Because why is he mentioning all that? Because he's trying to educate whosoever is watching the television, that particular program, to tell them, look here, money doesn't come, and even if it comes, it doesn't bring you all happiness or anything. Try to understand how he's trying to manage his life so that the aspiring millionaires or billionaires will have to do a few things right and not fantasize that accidentally it's possible to become rich. Similarly, the sadhana, all these are mentioned so that nobody should think that a person who is an Atmagyani can live like a king and do anything he wants and remain an Atmagyani or remain a Nirguna Upasaka with all success of direct access to the divine principle, Sachidananda Swarupa. No, that's not so. That's why in the next verse he's saying, Santushtaha Satatam Yogi. Satatam Sarira Sthiti Karanasya Labhe alabhe cha santushtaha utpanna alam pratyaya. What is that alam pratyaya? Alam pratyaya is alam. So if you're having food and somebody says, should I give you a little more? No. You are saying, we say, no, thank you. So in Sanskrit, they say alam. Or they will say om. Or say alam. Alam means no, it's enough. So that is alam pratyaya. You have that feeling of, no, I have had enough. You have that contentment. So whatever, except for just holding this body, whatever labha or alabha, whether they're making a profit or a loss, profit, they are not doing business. But the sarva karma sannyasis can still suffer losses and gains in life in terms of maybe peace of mind, maybe a piece of cloth, anything can be stolen, isn't it? Or maybe food, maybe a particular place where they were doing meditation. They went into the river to take a dip in the Ganges. When you come back, somebody else is sitting there. It's quite possible. That's a loss. So they have alam pratyaya. Whatever happens is happening for the good. That sort of an attitude they have. Tatha gunaval labhe. What is gunaval labhe? Something which gives you some profit. Possibly, maybe somebody gave you a couple of apples. Somebody was telling me this story. It's a real life story. It was told to me by my own spiritual counselor. And he was telling that, there was a monk who is meditating, and the Kumbh Mela was going on. And it was extremely chilly in the month of Magha. It's early January, month of January, very cold. And this guy was sitting and meditating by the Ganges. And there was a businessman who saw him there, and he put a blanket around him. But he found that this person continued to meditate. Another person who didn't have a blanket, he saw it and he knew this guy is not going to open his eyes. He comes and takes away the blanket. And the businessman is very disturbed. And he waits for a while and he puts another blanket because he doesn't want this particular person to sever. He's sitting there. It's very, very biting cold. He puts another blanket around him, but he doesn't open his eyes. After 10 minutes, another beggar comes and takes that blanket away and goes away. And this fellow then didn't know what to do because he knew that this monk is not going to open his eyes. So what it did, this is one event which has been seen by a few monks here, and that's how this is kind of given to us through the tradition of sharing these experiences. So what it did is he arranged for dry wood from somewhere, because he was camping there for the Kumbh Mela, and he said, can you arrange? And he appointed one of his staff that set fire. So this monk is benefited, but as soon as he sets fire, there are a couple of 4 or 5 people gathered, and the monk was getting disturbed, so he abandoned place and went away. His meditation broke. He saw too many people sitting and talking there, so he abandoned place and he just goes away. Now, that is the kind of highest level of, that contentment, and not being bothered about any physical events around them, which could be hurtful. Okay? Santushta utpanna alam pratyaya tatha gunavad labhe, like a blanket or a bit of heat, whatever. Viparye, so whether it comes or it goes away, they are completely having no feelings whatsoever. Satatam iti sarvatra sambhadyate. That satatam word you have to, link with whatever you are mentioning, advesta or maitra and santushtaha. Satatam yogi. You can link it with the word yogi, because we mentioned that you can't be in meditation all the time. So you should again and again, nairantirena, sort of go back to that level of meditative silence or self-awareness. Sarvatra sambhadyate yogi samahita chittaha. That is samadhi avastha. Yatatma sanyata sarira indriyadi sanghataha. This whole mind-body complex, what is it? This is a indriya sarira sanghata. And this sanghata means what? Is a conglomerate. It's a coming together of these, these karanas, these instruments of this body. And jatatma means you know how to control it. Dridha utarkikehi abhibhavitum asakyataya. What is Dridha Niksha? He has studied his texts. You can't confuse him, saying that, you have your caste system, you have this or that, you have a bunch of, ready-made questions which are thrown at anybody who wants to do meditation or this or that. They will say it's very patriarchal. You had a lot of caste, and sometimes I ask them, if you are enjoying studying Aristotle, who said that some people are by nature slaves, some people are by nature masters. Aristotle is not abandoned. He's taught all over the universities. In fact, there are powerful philosophers in the West who have said all of Western philosophy is basically footnotes on Plato and Aristotle. There's a great guy, Cagliostro, who sort of glorified the Greek tradition, isn't it? So, but then we don't abandon Aristotle. But it's quite possible that any religious spiritual tradition will have a few things which in a different point of history will become irrelevant. That has nothing to do with the purer, the more sacred, the more inherently liberational or purifying elements of that particular faith tradition. That is surviving because there is something purer which transcends history, which transcends social situations, historical situations, economic situations. You need to sort of look at those pure elements, as Swami Vivekananda tried to do. Take it out, and that is what theology does. That sort of re-establish the way you want to do your spiritual practice in a new socio-historical context. What you are doing here, for example, if you're in South America or North America, you cannot do what you're doing in Bengal or Odisha or North India because situations are different. But then, if you want to practice, you will just carry with you what is purer, what is subtler, what doesn't require the details. You are not bound by the details. You can still stick to the salient features. What are the purer elements? So, he cannot be defeated by kutarkikehi abhivavitum asakyataya. He is not easy to defeat. He is Dhrida Nishya. He has studied his text. He knows what he is doing. Sthira. And therefore he is quite quiet. I mean, he is not perturbed by somebody trying to disturb his mind. Nishchayo aham asmi akartri abhoktri sachidananda advitiyam. What sort of certainty he has? He's not saying I'm a very powerful, very well-read Pandit or anything. No, he doesn't have those thoughts. He's saying I'm not an agent. I don't have any kartritva. I don't have any agency. I don't have any bhoktritva. I'm not here to enjoy here anything. What am I? No, I'm beyond this kartritva and bhoktritva. I'm not an enjoyer and I'm not a doer. I'm beyond these stages where you are either a doer or an enjoyer. Enjoyer of the works that you do, the karma phalas. Doer is the doer of the agency of whatever work is done through you. But you are neither attached to the work nor its results. Who are you? He has this certainty in his mind. Sachidanandam Advitiyam. That is the consciousness he has. Sachidananda Swarupa. Advityam Brahma iti adhyavisayo yasya saha dridhanishaya. That kind of a person is very firm in his belief when he has started realizing that particular pratyaya which the Upanishads describe as aham brahmasmi. Sthita prajna ityarthaha. Then his mind is not perturbed. He is a sthita prajna. His mind is in peace. He is established in equanimity. Mai bhagavati vasudeve suddhe brahmani. Then Madhusudana makes it very clear. It's not about Saguna Brahma, but Nirguna Brahma. How? Mai Bhagavati, in me, Bhagavan. Whether somebody might have doubt that Mai, then Bhagavan makes it very clear. Suddhe Brahmani. Mai Arpita Manobuddhir Yo Mad Bhakta Same Priyaha. And because you have to again link it to the earlier verses, as I told you in Bhagavad Gita, you cannot take and interpret one verse in isolation or in dissociation from the earlier verses. So in order to have that particular continuity and congruence, otherwise it will become conflicting with an earlier verse, you have to mention that Bhagavan has glorified the Jnani earlier, and he has mentioned the Guhyatama, the top secret is to know that Bhagavan is beyond name and form, which is in chapter 9. Keeping those things in mind, Mai Arpita means not Arpita to Vasudeva, who is Vasudeva Krishna, but Vasudeva, who is Sachidananda Swarupa. Right? So he's saying that Mai Arpita Manobuddhihi Samarpita Antakaranaha. What is Antakarana? Manobuddhi Ahankara. And so you surrender that Antakarana. Why? Because this Antakarana is a delusional aspect of the realitical Atma. That I am, that mind, that buddhi, all these things are what? These are vikaras. That is not Atma. Atma is different from buddhi and manas and all that. Therefore, you surrender all that. Then, of course, you are focused on the Atman. Idrisa yo madhavaktaha. The way is aware of the self in such a way. Suddha akshara brahmavid. The person who is a akshara brahmavid. Not kshara. Not with nama rupa. Not with any idols or anything. But he is a akshara vid. Sa me priyaha. He is all the time dear to me. Mad Atmatvat, because he's no different from me. He's Tattvamasi, he has already realized it. So he's verily me. He's part. Look at the love God has. He's saying that he's not different from me. Because the moment he says different, then that fellow is not self-realized. And he cannot fulfill the description that we have mentioned here. Now in verse number 15, he says, that fellow doesn't disturb anyone, doesn't get disturbed by anyone. So in a way, it's a further elaboration of what we have already studied. The next few verses will be like this only. Yasmano udvijate loka, lokano udvijate chastayah, harsamarsa bhayodvegair, mukta yah sa chame priyah. Yasman na udvijate. There is no udvega, there is no disturbance. He is not perturbed. Yasmat, by him. That fellow is, let's imagine that Atmagyani or that sannyasi is walking through a crowd or goes to a temple or goes to any house. He'll be such a person that no one should feel disturbed by his presence. That is a test of a sadhu. He should not cause any disharmony. It is very important to mark. A lot of us, with all our wisdom, with all our goodness, cause disharmony because we want to control the external circumstances because of our power or knowledge. So you walk into a marriage party and you find faults, or you walk into a family situation, you find faults. You may be actually correct. I'm not saying you're not correct in finding faults, but it's quite possible that you are becoming a kind of an intrusive force which is causing disharmony there. If something wrong is going on, you want to correct it, it's fine. But there are smarter ways of doing it from a spiritual point of view. So he doesn't disturb anyone. Does it mean that this monk is going and the girl is being harassed? He tolerates? No, I don't think so. Because by very nature is vidhyatma. That Bhagavan has clarified very earlier. He will not, violate moral code, and he's not going to tolerate injustice or harm. A baby is being harmed. Will he tolerate the monk because he will not create any udvega or any kind of disturbance? No, that is not the meaning here. It will not cause effectively any disharmony. And because of him, nobody is disturbed. Doesn't mean a criminal should not be disturbed. No, the criminal should be afraid of him. Loka no udvite cha yaha. And then he is not disturbed by anybody else. That is also to be taken into account. Harsha marso bhayod vegehi. Harsha is happiness, elation, sense of joy. Amarsa is asahishnata, inability to tolerate somebody who is doing very well. You have that, what do you call it, intolerance. But more correctly, it will be kind of jealousy, a mixture of intolerance born out of jealousy, and bhaya, fear, udvega, that particular thing, perturbation, anxiety. Udvegir mukta is free from these bhaya, fear, anxiety, and jealousy or intolerance and elation. He is not affected by all this. The one who is so free or liberated from entrapment in such emotions is very dear to me, Bhagavan says. Yasmat sarva bhuta abhayadainaha. The sannyasi is a sarva bhuta abhayadain. He gives that abhaya. That means what? He is not distributing fearlessness. No. He doesn't cause fear in anybody because he doesn't intend to harm anyone. Sannyasinaha, that guy is a sannyasi. Hetoha na udvijate na santapyate loka. So as a result of him, because of that sannyasi, nobody, loka means any social gathering, any individual, any family, they are not put into any anxiety or disharmony or any disturbance. Na santapyate, they are not disturbed, they are not harmed. Yaha kaschidapi janaha. And then tatha lokan niraparadha udvijanehi ekabratat. It's quite possible that there are some people who are by nature all the time trying to harm others. Mischievous people, noxious ones. It's quite possible. Srima Pondicherry, there is a story that there was a spirit and he used to cause some disturbance in the ashram by throwing stones. And mother, through her occult meditation, I mean, this is what I have read and heard, she sort of talked to that fellow, that spirit. He said, why are you doing this? Why are you creating disturbance during meditation, during prayer, when students are studying? What's your problem? Why are you coming here? If you need any spiritual help, let me know. But why are you disturbing children in the school? And the inmates are meditating or doing any prayers. You are disturbing. He said, I only know one thing. Mother asked him, what? He said, I only know how to throw stones. So I'll throw stones. That's all I know. And that story was shared by mother to say that it's quite possible you come across people who are by nature violent because of their past lives, because of their karma. How do you deal with it? That is the problem, spiritually speaking. Now, here is one attitude. If he's causing active, in an individual is causing active harm, of course, you have to, take shelter, in the court of law, or take shelter, take the help of the government, or try to deal with it, whichever way is fine. But here he's saying, such a person who is causing any kind of problem by his very nature, this fellow, khalajana na udvijate cha yaha, this fellow will not be disturbed. He's causing some harm, anything. But the sannyasi, the atmagyani, will not absolutely get distracted by the presence or by the activities of this guy. But the earlier question of mine will come back also now. What do you do with a person who is immoral and causing harm to a helpless woman or a child? Will you tolerate that? Is it? No, I don't think that is covered here. He's talking about what otherwise is tolerable, should be tolerated. Because this fellow is by nature all the time acting as per Shastras. Shastra doesn't accept serious injustice. And therefore, that is perhaps not covered here. What is covered is that you should not take upon yourself to pick up a fight with somebody who is mischievous. He will pay for his karma, and there are other people in society who will punish. But you are a sadhu. You cannot take up that responsibility. You need to know how to sort of walk away. But of course, serious injustice, I think you have to stand up. But other cases, you need to know where to sort of call it a day and withdraw. When other people are there to take up the fight, you need not get into it, because you are a sannyasi. Then Advaita Darsitvat, because he doesn't see any division. Everybody is just one Atma. He's in a very high level of subtle consciousness. Parama Karunikattvena, and he's extremely kind and compassionate. Shama Silatvatsa, and he's very forgiving in nature. Therefore, even if somebody slaps him, he's not affected. Kincha Harsha, Swasya Priyalave. And what is that Harsha? Swasya Priyalave. What you love, you get it. Then you have a sense of elation. He's narrating it. Romanja, Asrupatadi, Hetuhu, Ananda Abhivanjaka, Chitta Vritti Vishesha. So what happens is that you had missed your cell phone and you are in distress because all your data is there, and you want to board a flight or a train or anything, and your ticket number, everything is there. Suddenly you get it. So you are very happy. So you have that thrill in you, that romanchana. Asrupata, you meet an old friend. So your eyes are filled with tears. So, or you get back a book you had lost. So you are full of tears. You're very happy. That kind of chitta vritti vishesha is harsha. What is amarsha? Para utkarsha asahana rupa. Somebody is doing well and you don't want to tolerate it. Asahana rupa chitta vritti vishesha. It's a very bad negative thing. Parasrikatarata. Bhayam. You know that Bhagradi darsana. Adhina chitta vritti vishesha. Suddenly you are in the forest, you are meditating, and a tiger is kind of sniffing you. Can you imagine? So vritti vishesha trasaha. So you have that fear. Vishesha trasaha. Udvegaha. What is that? Ekaki katham vijane sarva parigraha sunyo Jivisyami. You took sannyasa and then went to a forest. Your guru said, okay, where do I live, sir? And he says, okay, you have this cave, which is 2 kilometers away from me. Go sit there. And sir, what do I eat? No, no, we have somebody who will give you 4 5 chapatis a day, and you do this purasharana, you do this japa, meditation. Then that poor guy goes there. And that place is about 2 kilometers away from the main ashram. So there is no one to talk to. Then he thinks like this: Ekaki katham vijane sarva parigraha sunni jivisyami. How do I live alone in this jungle? I came to the ashram so that I can have companions. I can talk about Shastra, do some Shravana Manana Niti Vyasana. This guru is so cruel, sending me to a cave. How do I live there all alone? Iti eva evam vidho vyakulata rupa. This kind of an anxious, that desperation. Vyakulata rupa chitta vritti vishesha. So you have 4 5 things already mentioned: harsha, marsha, bhaya, udvega. All this. Tehi harsha, marsha, bhaya, udvega, vegehi muktayah. The fellow who is free from these things is not affected. Leave him in a forest alone, he is not bothered. In a crowd where people are kicking him, he is not bothered. That means what? He's kind of liberated, more or less. Bhagavan says, he is dear to me. Advaita darsita taya, because he is all the time looking at the unity of things, not the division. So he's not having fear or happiness. Tad ayogatvena. Now all these harsa, marsha, bhaya, udvega and other things, he is not trying to fight these things. They abandon him. That is a beautiful description. These things like money and house and relations and love and affection and anger and cruelty and anxiety, he is not trying to fight them. He's too subtle. He's too superior. He's too refined as a sadhaka. They abandon him. They think this guy doesn't deserve our attention. We should go to a guy who has money, who is younger, and we will corrupt his mind. Then he will run away and he will buy certain things. He will do some drama. And they will target there. You see, like virus targets the weaker guys with weak immune systems. Similarly, this raga, dvesa, bhaya, udvega, they find who is the right candidate. And this sannyasi is not a good candidate for them. So they abandon him. That is what is mentioning. Tad ayogatvena tehi eva swayam parityakta. He is abandoned by them. Not to tesam tyagaya swayam vyaprita iti bhavam. He is not trying to fight them. They abandon him because they think this guy is ayogya. He's not good enough for us. How anger says, how can I do a game? This guy doesn't deserve. He's not a good candidate. So he's disqualified by anger and this anxiety and elation and and jealousy. They abandon him. Beautiful. And then he's saying, then those people are madbhaktaha iti anakrishyate. You sort of address it. Idruso madbhakta yaha sa me priya iti purvavat. That fellow is dearer to me. And let's look at the next verse, in the verse number 16. Anapeksha suchirdakshaha udasino gatabhyataha sarvarambha parityagi yo madbhaktaha same priyaha. Anapeksha. He doesn't depend on anything. He's not sapeksha. He's independent. He's not a paratantra. He's swatantra. Anapeksha. Suchirdakshaha. He's suchihi. All the time pure. Bahya abhyantara. His mind is pure. His body is pure. He takes his bath in time. He may not have too many clothes, but he wears clean clothes. And then has a clean mind. He's a pure mind. He's also daksha. Any kriya karma, whatever one has to do, like for example, early morning offering a bit of water to the sun. There's a poor man offering whatever you have. There's somebody in need, having some compassionate, helpful attitude towards him. He's daksha in that. He's expert in doing whatever is required to be done. He's a vidhyatma, as Bhagavan has mentioned earlier. Udasina. And then udasina here is essentially, he is not taking any sides. That is what Shankaracharya is. Because udasina, vadasina, we have another interpretation. That Bhagavan saying these karmas do not bind me because I'm nowhere affected. And he's bringing in the relationship between the sky and the atmosphere. Here udasina is completely nirapekya. not taking sides of any friends, and not having any attachment. Gatabhyataha. He's beyond that particular level of consciousness where he can be harmed or hurt or humiliated by anyone. Gatabhyataha. Sarvarambha parityagi. Any activities, nitya namitika, that arambha, any karma, sarvarambha parityagi, he is not having to do it. Why? He is the sarva karma sannyasi. Yo madbhaktaha same priyaha. And that fellow is dear to me. We are just 2-3 minutes, but okay, we will do the details because we will also do the Sankara Bhashya. So we'll stop here and then we will finish it tomorrow. We have 4 more verses along with the commentary on this. We'll finish the chapter tomorrow. So if you have any questions, you can ask. I'm going to bring this YouTube to an end.